What's up, hypertrophy enthusiasts? So today we're talking about how I put an inch on my arms in under a year. Something that some people think is straight up impossible to do naturally. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the nutritional approach that I used, the exercises that I used, sets, reps, volumes, execution, the intensity that I used, the effort that I used, show you a little bit of footage of me performing the exercises, how I tracked progress, how I avoided injury or managed injury when I actually did get injured during the process, and a lot more. And I hope this is helpful. I can't promise that you will also gain an inch on your arms, but hopefully you have some practical takeaways from this. So first things first, just to get it out of the way, not sexy, not exciting, kind of boring, nutrition. I bulked, I massed. Over the summer, I cut down to around 85 kilos or, a little under 190 pounds or so. And then into the winter, I went up to around 100 kilos or 220-ish pounds. And that is absolutely instrumental. And I think if you try to maintain at a lean body fat percentage, good luck gaining anything, much less an inch on your arms. And so from July 2021 till now, my right arm has gone from 16.75 to the 17.75 that it is now, and my left has gone from 16 to just over 17. So there's an imbalance here, you can probably see it, but each has gained roughly an inch at the same body weight. I think that's important because anyone, literally anyone, can gain an inch on their arms if they go from 10% body fat to 25% body fat. So we're looking for muscular gains here, not just fatceps. And the overall training split that I had for most of this time, not all, but most, was day 1 lower, day 2 upper with a focus on chest and lats, and then day 3 was a specific arm day, along with a little bit of like rotator cuff stuff and delts and that kind of stuff. But it was mostly focused on the arm. So I did have a more or less dedicated arm day for months and months and months. And I do think this can help. Compound movements obviously are going to be targeting the arms, especially like close grip stuff, close grip bench press or narrow grip rows, that kind of stuff. But I do think most people want specific direct isolation work as well. And you might say, hey, Geoff, you're doing upper day 2 and then arms the day after, so you're training them twice in a row. Yeah, but arms recover fairly quickly anyway for a lot of people. And if you're doing your back work and your chest work correctly, it's not going to be a ton of arms. They're worked, but not to the same extent as the muscles that you're really using it to try to target. Now let's go into the actual exercises that I used. For triceps, basically just 3 isolation movements. Not 5, not 6, not 10. I just picked 3 that I had grown to love and that I saw were getting me results. The first one was overhead cable extensions, where you're leaned away from the cable. And I put on a significant amount of strength on this movement. I went from using like 40 to 45 kilos for most sets, up until using 60, 65, even 70 kilos, peaking at around 70 kilos for 8 reps. So when people see my arms, you have to realize this sweepy boy here, a lot of that is the overhead work. And so when people see my bench press, they're not impressed, and they shouldn't be. But the overhead work with 70 kilos, that kind of explains why I have a good amount of growth here. I also worked in a standing variation where the cable was set low, and then I was doing it like this, obviously still with both arms. This is a little bit stricter because with the facing away version, you can kind of use a little bit of momentum. And this is good and bad, right? They both have advantages and disadvantages, and I like to combine these. I use the facing away variation for a little bit of overload, really going heavy there, getting a nice stretch and really like getting after the weight. And then I use the standing version to keep a little bit stricter, slightly higher reps for more of an isolation type of movement. They're both isolations, but slightly different. And because this was a new movement for me, I put on a huge amount of strength. I went from 25 kilos for 6 reps up until 55 kilos for 5 reps. So my strength quite literally more than doubled. And I found this was actually a very, very good movement for me and was very, very helpful. The third movement that I used were just normal rope pushdowns. I go pretty heavy on these. I don't keep them super strict. I used to, mind-muscle connection. You got to squeeze and contract and really control. Nah, I just said fuck it and I went heavy, up to 60, 65, 70 kilos. I even did like 80 kilos for 3. I wouldn't really recommend triples on this. Probably better to have like 10 to 15, up to 20 reps. But I did it, why not? These 3 movements complement each other well. You don't want to have only overhead work, and you don't want to have only non-overhead work. I find that having the combination is very, very helpful. And I'm sure a lot of people will see my technique on some of these lifts and think, oh, that's bad form, that's bad technique. It fucking worked. And I would say that the majority of the arm gains were actually in the tricep. The triceps are roughly 2/3 of your upper arms. So if you really want big arms, you should be focusing on the triceps at least as much as the biceps. I see a lot of guys, they do a lot of curls, but they neglect their triceps to the point where they stay small. Another movement that I used, not necessarily on this day, but sometimes the previous day, was the closed grip bench press. I know, training triceps twice in a row. My God, amazing. And for this, I went from doing singles with 90 kilos up until doing multiple sets in the 5 to 7 rep range. Another great movement are dips. I didn't incorporate them very much during this training phase because I typically keep them for when the fucking gym closes due to lockdowns, because I can do them in the training park or wherever. But they are an excellent option, especially if you do them weighted. Now, moving on to biceps, I did have a little bit more exercise variation here compared to triceps. I did preacher curls, spider curls, barbell curls, reverse grip curls, cable curls, a lot of different curls, but the 3 that I used the most were reverse grip curls, spider curls, and incline dumbbell curls. Those were sort of my 3 staples that I used most of the time. So incline dumbbell curls, great movement, excellent stretch. You can set the bench to where it's quite low, but I prefer to have it a little bit more vertical, maybe more like 60 degrees rather than 45 degrees, although this is personal preference, and you can experiment and see what works best for you. I put on quite a bit of strength on this movement as well. In hindsight, I kind of overdid it. It is a stretching movement, and any kind of stretching movement, whether it's a Romanian deadlift, whether it's a pec fly or anything like that, you need to be wary of the volume that you do because it just takes a little bit longer to recover from. You're causing likely more muscle damage, a little bit more stress and stretch on the tendon, therefore you have to be more careful with it. And surprise, surprise, I got injured. But more about that a little bit later. I also did quite a bit of spider curling. This is sort of the opposite of the incline dumbbell curl. Unlike the stretch position, you're more emphasizing the contracted position. So there's very little tension in the bottom and it's most challenging at the top. This means that you can just do more volume, closer to failure. It means that every set is less stimulative, but you can do more sets. So you have to keep in mind, not every exercise is going to be equal in terms of your recovery, in terms of the fatigue, and in terms of the stimulus. There are levels to this shit. Finally, I did reverse grip curls as well as dumbbell hammer curls just to target the forearm and the brachialis, brachioradialis, etc. And you can't just work the biceps. You want to be working that brachialis as well. You can kind of see it, that muscle between the biceps and triceps. You can really only see it when you get lean. I'm not quite there yet, but this is really, really important just to really bring out the entire definition of the arm. So I did, of course, do compound movements on that upper day, the day before that dedicated arm day. And so that's going to be Helms rows, chest supported rows, pull downs, pull ups, that kind of thing. And so those, of course, work elbow flexion as well. Now, in terms of the volume that I use, some people might be surprised about this. I did a whole video up there on ultra high volume. I was doing 18 sets of biceps per week and 14 sets of triceps. And that is just the isolation. Now, a lot of people might say this is overtraining. It wasn't overtraining if I got better and bigger and stronger. So I think a lot of people are actually undertraining their arms. Some are overtraining. You have to take into account your own individual recovery capabilities and capacities. But clearly, this was not overtraining. I've had people tell me that I'm overtraining when I'm getting stronger and feel fine. So you can maybe, just maybe, train your ability to recover and to get better over time. In terms of effort and proximity to failure, reps in reserve, RPE, etc., I would say that I took 70 to 80% of sets either to failure or 0 reps in reserve. So I would get, a 5-second rep, and then I'm not going to get the next one, so I would just stop the set. Another 20, maybe 15% of sets, I would say I took to 1 rep in reserve. And apart from that, pretty much nothing was 2, 3, 4, 5 reps in reserve. That's just not how I operate when it comes to isolation movements.
Easy.
And I'm not saying that you can't get any results from 2 reps in reserve, but I don't think that's going to be optimal for most people. And when we're talking 3, 4, 5 reps in reserve for an easy isolation type of movement, I would say you should make failure or very close to failure your default way of doing things. Again, not hard to recover from, and you'll probably only benefit from it. In terms of intensity techniques, so drop sets or partials or assisted reps or slow eccentrics, I didn't do that much of it. I just let the near failure and volume do the job. I think sometimes people get carried away with drop sets, and sometimes just doing a hard set to failure is harder than a drop set. I see people, they start doing a set and it gets hard, so they drop the weight. And then it gets hard again, so they drop the weight again. Well, yeah, it was a drop set and you're getting some benefit from it, but you're more doing it to avoid failure rather than going past failure.
It's so hard. Drop it like it's hard. Drop it like it's hard. Drop it like it's hard.
And I think in the past I got carried away with the sort of mind-muscle connection or drop sets or super high reps. And I found that doing more moderate reps, just doing more volume, training closer to failure on the basics was what helped the most, as well as just focusing on progression. Full transparency, I did get injured partway through. I don't remember exactly what month, but I got a little bit of biceps tendonitis on the right side. And I would say this is mostly just due to overuse and doing too much work, again, with those stretching exercises. So incline dumbbell curls, preacher curls, that kind of thing. You have to respect those movements a little bit more than I did. And how I got around this, I warmed up a ton. I would do multiple sets of 20 to 30 reps. On my other days, I started doing super high rep curls as well. Not band pushdowns, but just normal rope pushdowns for sets of 50. I didn't even write this in my training log. It was just a habit that I did just to get blood into the elbows. And this seemed to help. It took a month or 2 for it to go away, to where I could get back to doing incline dumbbell curls. But it didn't really disrupt things too much. You can usually work around injury rather than just giving up. And there's this continuum, at least in theory, between effort per set and the number of sets that you can do, your volume. I kind of just said fuck it and did both. And I kind of, paid the consequences in terms of injury, but I also got some sweet-ass gains. However, I also do think that maybe a more moderate and reasonable approach is better for most people, where the volume is a little bit more manageable. Maybe you're keeping 1 or 2 reps in the tank more often than I did. Will you get the same results? I don't know. It's sort of hard to say. Hindsight is always 20/20, but sometimes it's not even 20/20. You don't know if you had changed something, it would have gotten you the same results, or worse results, or better results. And so, the experiment of training is something that is always ongoing. So anyway, that is how I achieved the impossible. Hope you liked the video. Let me know if you have any questions about the exercises that I used or the process as a whole. Definitely grab a copy of my book. It details these exercises as well as a hell of a lot more, how to set everything up in a reasonable and intelligent way, and how to avoid injury as well. Maybe I should have read my own book. Like, comment, subscribe, all that other good stuff, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.